Do you struggle with finding the exact right sponsor for the seekers in your initiation process? If you do, I feel your pain, because right now we have about 6 inquirers in our process, and every day I wake up thinking, well, who in our community can I pair this person with?
Hi, my name is Diana McAlintoe.
And I'm Nick Wagner.
And in this team initiation video, we're talking all about sponsors.
So let's first of all define what a sponsor is. And in the catechumenate process, a sponsor is a temporary role. It officially begins with the right for entrance into the catechumenate. We want to introduce our potential sponsor to our seeker well before that right, but officially they start at the right for entrance into the catechumenate, and their role continues throughout the catechumenate, which could last several years if necessary. So it could be a long-term commitment, but it's temporary. It ends right at the rite of election.
From the rite of election forward, another person, another role takes over, and that is the role of the godparent. Now, the godparent can be a completely different person than the sponsor, or it could be the sponsor themselves. That is all decided by the catechumen themselves. The catechumen chooses their godparent, and the catechumen then is accompanied by their godparent throughout their entire life.
So one of the important roles of the sponsor is to show up for the rites. So the very first one that the sponsor has to show up for is the rite for entrance into the catechumenate. Then throughout the catechumenate, we celebrate the minor rites, which include blessings, minor exorcisms, and the anointing of the catechumens, and we want the sponsors to be present for those. A not obvious rite might be the Sunday liturgy, so we want the sponsor to be with their catechumen at Sunday Mass. Usually, we know so you've got travel plans and all that, but the norm would be the sponsor would be with their catechumen at Mass. The sponsor might participate as sponsor during the handing on rites, depending on when they're celebrated. They can be celebrated before Lent. But as Diana said, with the rite of election and then throughout Lent, the sponsor no longer has an official role in the rituals.
So with the godparent, they have the same kind of very important job for the rites, starting with the rite of election and all of the rites that take place during the period of purification and enlightenment, which often coincides with Lent. And so those other rituals during the period of purification and enlightenment are the 3 scrutinies, the handing on rites if they had not taken place during the period of the catechumenate, and then of course the celebration of the initiation sacraments, including the preparation rites on Holy Saturday. And then the godparent continues on for life to be a companion, a spiritual companion for their neophyte, for their godchild. And that is a permanent role. Let's just clarify that in the order of Christian initiation of adults, you'll see these 2 job descriptions, the job description for the sponsor and the job description for the godparent in paragraphs 10 and 11.
Now, another really important role for the sponsor is to be a person who accompanies their seeker. And we're using accompany or accompaniment in a very specific way here in the way Pope Francis uses it. And what we mean by that is not just hanging out with, but being sort of a spiritual guide and a spiritual center point. So you're always helping your seeker discover and encounter Christ in a deeper and deeper way. Now remember, we're talking about catechumens here. And if they're true catechumens, they don't really know how to, they don't initially know how to move into a deeper relationship with Christ. So by example and by some very gentle prompting, the sponsor is going to help the seeker move into those deeper conversion experiences.
So let's look at some of the phases of the catechumenate period where the sponsor would exercise this role of accompaniment. In the period of evangelization and the pre-catechumenate, you don't often think of the sponsor taking on a role because the rite of entrance hasn't taken place yet. But the sponsor does have a very important role, because you want to make sure that long before the day that you celebrate the rite for entrance for your seeker, they have already met and are talking with and getting to know their companion. There needs to be a lot of conversation between the sponsor and the seeker so that the sponsor can authentically stand next to their companion on the day of the rite for entrance and present this person to the community, say a little something about who this person is and why they are seeking this way of life, and to really authentically support this person as they take this major step into the journey of faith.
Then the next phase that the sponsor has a really important role in accompanying their companion is during the period of the catechumenate. And if you've listened to us for very much time at all, you know that during the period of the catechumenate, we're very focused on paragraph 75 in the Order of Christian Initiation of Adults. Paragraph 75 is sort of the training agenda for the catechumen. And there are 4 areas of Christian discipline that the Church expects us to train the catechumen to be able to live as a Christian. The first area is the area of word and tradition. The second area is the living in the Christian community as a Christian disciple. The third area is prayer and worship. And the fourth area is apostolic witness.
And so maybe just 1 or 2 examples in each of those areas of what the sponsor could be doing to support and walk with their companion. In the area of word and tradition, they could simply read the gospel, the readings for Sunday with their companion and talk about that with their companion before coming to Mass on Sunday with them.
They might also discuss with their companion, their own belief in Catholic tradition, why I'm a Catholic, and the things about the Catholic tradition that give me such hope and give me a real sense of meaning and joy in my life.
In the area of Christian community and living as a disciple within the community itself, the sponsor can simply accompany their companion to parish events throughout the week. So it's not just Sunday, but if you have parish events on Sunday, the sponsor should accompany their companion to those events as well. But it's not, the parish itself is where formation is happening. And so your sponsor can easily accompany your catechumen to any of those parish gatherings.
Now, equally important, the Christian life that takes place in the parish is paralleled with the Christian life that takes place in the domestic church. So the sponsor will want to have an active prayer life going on in their home and be able to share that with their companion, to give their companion example and ideas of how the companion can start developing a domestic church in their own home.
Mm-hmm. In the area of the discipline of worship and prayer, in addition to those building up of practices of prayer in their own home, the sponsor can simply pray with the companion. And it doesn't have to be elaborate prayer or anything very deep or theological. It's just praying for their companion, praying with them, blessing them. There are lots of different blessings that can be prayed over the catechumen that the sponsor can lead. Mealtime prayers.
And then, as we said earlier, Sunday liturgy is the primary discipline that the catechumens need to learn in this section of their training. And so the sponsor is going to want to make sure that they're sort of accompanying their companion at the Sunday liturgy. And if for some reason the companion starts not showing up, the sponsor is going to want to follow up about that and find out what's happening, why they're not there. And maybe, if there's some spiritual or emotional reason they're not showing up, the sponsor may need to bring in some more help from the team to be able to address that, or perhaps they have their skills enough to address it themselves.
And then in the last area of Christian discipline, the area of Christian witness, the sponsor certainly should be an example of that witness out in the world by their own words and deeds of service and justice for those most in need.
And a baby step to get there is just to practice sharing your own faith with the other team members and with your companion. Those are sort of safe spaces in which you can proclaim what you believe about Jesus without seeming like you're weird or different, so that when you go out into the world, and it may be a little bit countercultural to identify as a Christian, you have a little more practice in doing that.
Now, in the period of purification and enlightenment, the sponsor's role ends, but they still have a job to do in terms of discernment with others in the community, with the pastoral team, with the pastor, with the catechumen themselves, and maybe even with the catechumen's godparent who has been chosen by the catechumen, to discern when the catechumen is ready to move on to that third period, the period of purification and enlightenment.
And once we discern that the seeker, the catechumen is ready to go to the rite of election, we're pretty much discerning their readiness for full initiation. So we don't want to send them to the rite of election until we know they're ready for full initiation. And at that moment, that's when the godparent now is, and if the godparent is different than the sponsor, the godparent will have had to have some role of accompaniment before the rite of election, because at the rite of election, ritually, the godparent is assuring the bishop and the community that this catechumen is ready to move forward to the sacraments of initiation. And so if the godparent, might be a family member or a relative, but maybe doesn't know their catechumen that well, maybe they live in a different state or different country, and they fly in for this rite, and they might say the ritual words that assure the bishop that this person is ready without truly knowing that in their heart. So and I know that happens in lots and lots of families. It happens in my family, whoever's turn it is next, right? But somehow we have to help these godparents, if they're going to be sort of more ceremonial than actual. We need to help them have at least some faith conversations with their catechumen before the rite of election takes place.
So, since we're talking about godparents, let's look at some of the qualifications that the church gives us that are characteristics, things that we want to look for in good godparents. Now, remember, one big difference between sponsors and godparents is that a sponsor is a gift given by the parish community to the seeker themselves. The seeker, the potential catechumen, does not choose their own sponsor. The parish provides a sponsor, and a parish could provide more than one sponsor to a catechumen. And a sponsor could accompany more than one catechumen as well. That's different than a godparent. A godparent is chosen by the catechumen themselves, because by the time they have fulfilled and deepened their discipleship in those 4 areas of Christian life, they will know what would make a good godparent. But the church also gives us some guidelines about that, and we'll find those in the Code of Canon Law.
Yeah, that's another distinction between the sponsor and the godparent. There are canons or rules that the church has for godparents that they don't have for sponsors. It doesn't mean the sponsor role is unimportant. It just means that the church is recognizing this godparent role as a lifelong commitment. And so the church has set up some guidelines, some rules about who can serve in that role. So one of the rules is obviously that this godparent, this potential godparent, has to have the intention to fulfill their role to the best of their ability.
And they're living those 4 areas of Christian discipline as well, the area of word, community, worship, and witness.
Also, a godparent has to be at least 16 years of age or older. And there can be exceptions, but that has to kind of go through the bishop, and you can't just say, well, okay, you're 15 and you can be a godparent.
a godparent needs to be Catholic. I mean, we don't often think of that, but they do need to be Catholic. They do need to be baptized, confirmed, and sharing regularly in the Eucharist.
Now, some potential godparents will try to decline the role because they don't think they're holy enough or know enough about the faith. And that's not a requirement. The requirement is they have to be a good role model, but they don't have to be perfect. They just have to be a good Catholic that's doing their best to live a Christian life.
And one of those is about marriage too. If they are in a marriage that is an irregular marriage, or if there are any other obstacles in their lifestyle that prevents them from being a good example of the Christian tradition and way of living, then they might not be the best suitable godparent for this person.
So another rule that seems kind of obvious is that the parent of the person getting baptized cannot also be the godparent of the person getting baptized. So the mother or father of the catechumen cannot also be the godparent for that catechumen. Now, interestingly enough, the canon doesn't say anything about spouses. So technically, it's legal that a spouse could serve as a godparent if they're married to the catechumen, but we don't recommend that. That should be a distinct role, and if at all possible, find a separate person to be the godparent and not the spouse.
Finally, a godparent needs to make sure that this is a lifelong promise that they are making to their godchild. And if a person has more than one godparent, the godparent needs to be a male and a female. It cannot have 2 men and 2 women be godparents. So those are some of the regulations around the role of godparent. You'll find those in the Code of Canon Law in numbers 874, 892, and 893.
So that's a lot about godparents and sponsors, and there's a lot more to say about that. You can find more information about sponsors and godparents on our website, teaminitiation.com.
So hopefully this has given you a little less stress as you are looking for companions for your seekers and catechumens and candidates. We are always so blessed to do this ministry with you, and we are praying for you daily. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Diana McAlintal.
And I'm Nick Wagner.
Come over to teaminitiation.com for even more resources for your ministry.